Now, no matter which mount we're going to use, we're going to mount it onto the front of the airplane with a healthy amount of welder adhesive. So we're going to take our welder adhesive and put a generous bead of welder all four sides of the mount as shown. Okay. And we're going to take this, we're going to push it onto the front of the airplane like that. We'll clean up any excess welder that gets left behind and rub it down into all of the seams. We can rub a little bit of welder on the foam on the front of the aircraft, because this is where the aircraft gets most of its abuse, right here. When we crash, we tend to crash right on the front, and this will help to keep this part of the airplane alive. Now, like we mentioned at the beginning of the build video, we send a spare nose along with your aircraft, so if you do tear up the first nose, you get a second chance, but we'll try to have this nose last as long as possible. And then we're going to take some welder adhesive, make sure everybody can see this, and we're going to put it in the seams on the back side of the mount, on at least a couple of the sides. One on top, and make sure everybody can see this, and on the bottom. Okay. And we'll have the welder down in the seams, and we want to make sure that everything is straight. We don't want our motor pointing at a funny angle. Okay, and we'll let that dry. And if we had wanted to use this mount instead, we would have put that mount on. And of course, normally we'll have a hacker motor on the front of the foam mount. I'm just showing you here for clarity so you can see all the way around how the foam mount goes on. Okay. So here is the bottom of the rudder hinge line, and this is the elevator and the elevator spar. And we want to make sure before we do anything else that we have plenty of travel here on the elevator so that it can go freely up and down. And we're running into a little bit of foam here when we deflect the elevator. So all I'm going to do is just trim a little bit on our fuselage piece. Okay. Just get it out of the way. And I'll trim just a little bit on our rudder piece. Just take a little bit of foam off as necessary so that our elevator has plenty of room to travel. Okay. And now if we look, we have plenty of travel. Okay. And now we're ready to finish hinging. Okay, so now we're ready to hinge the rudder, the bottom half of the rudder here. That's the last hinging on the airplane. So I'm going to take piece of masking tape that I was using to hold the aileron right where I wanted it, and I'm going to use the tape to hold the rudder right where it needs to be, and we'll squeeze a little bit of welder's glue onto the hinge line just like the other hinge lines, and then we'll take our razor and use it to spread the welder's glue out into a nice thin hinge. Okay. And we'll let that dry, and the bottom of the rudder will be all hinged. Alright, so now we're going to tackle the elevator system. And so first, this is your elevator horn. Okay, you can see it's different in shape from the other horns in the kit. This one's shorter because the elevator cord is shorter than the other control surfaces cord where the horn goes in. And also, if you remember, we installed a blade spar in the elevator, stiffened it up, and so this horn has a little notch in it to fit over that blade spar. So if you take the elevator and you squeeze it, you can open up the slot here where the horn goes, and we'll trial fit the horn in the slot. Okay, get it to sit all the way down. Alright, I'll show you how it's going to look when it's in the right spot, just like that. Okay, make sure you can see that on camera. That's how the horn's going to look. If you turn it over, you can see that it comes up right to the edge of the foam here, and it fits right over the spar. So the horn locks into the spar. It gives you very positive elevator control with good precision because everything is locked together, wood on carbon. Alright, so the way we install this is the way we installed the other horns. We're going to take our welder's glue and we're going to make sure you can see this on camera. We're going to put some welder's glue down into the slot for the horn. And we're going to take the horn and make sure we've got some glue from the slot on the horn. And then we're going to push the horn down again until it just comes flush with the bottom. Okay. And then we'll let that dry for a few minutes. And while that's drying, we'll install the elevator servo up here on the fuselage of the aircraft. Okay, the first step is we're going to take our elevator servo arm that we assembled previously. We center up our elevator servo and we install the arm as shown. Now, the elevator servo is going to go right here on the top of the aircraft, but our electronic hookup is going to be on the bottom of the airplane. So what we need to do is we need to take our knife, make sure you can see this, and we need to cut a slot right there, slot in the foam. And the purpose of the slot is so the servo wire can be slid down through the slot and we can bring it out the bottom of the aircraft. This way the servo wires for all of the servos will be in the same spot and they can all be easily plugged in. So now we've done that. Now what we're going to do, take a little bit of welder's glue and we're going to spread a little bit of welder's glue here where the elevator servo goes and a little bit up on the sides of the slot, just a little bit. And we're going to slide the elevator servo in. Okay. Make sure you got a good view here. Slide the elevator servo in as shown. If you notice, the servo head with the servo arm is at the rear toward the back of the aircraft. And then we're going to pull our servo wire down tight and we'll make sure it's all in the right place. Okay. And there's how the installation should look. Right there. That's how the installation should look when it's done. Okay. Back out a little bit. So we now have our servo with servo arm and our control horn installed. We're going to use the top hole in the elevator horn, just like we did on the aileron. We use the top hole here. We're going to use the top hole here. And we're going to assemble our elevator push rod the same way that we assembled our aileron push rods. We're going to use 2 of the Z-bends, the carbon rod, and the heat shrink tubing. Okay? When you use your heat gun to shrink the tubing, you'll have to put something that can curve here, a piece of paper or some tin foil or something, as a shield so you don't melt the foam. You can also use other heat sources. The heat gun is a convenient heat source, but it's really hot and it's a lot of heat, and so it's a little bit dangerous around the foam. You can also use a soldering iron. You can bring a soldering iron just up close to the heat shrink, and that'll shrink it fine. That's a little more focused heat source, a little easier to stay out of trouble with. But as long as you have something to sit behind the heat shrink, a piece of tin foil or heavy paper, cardboard, something like that, you'll be fine. And we'll go ahead and assemble that push rod, and then we'll move on to the rudder. Almost forgot. Whenever we do a push rod, we need everything to be accurate so that we get the right push rod length. So we've already centered our servo. We want to make sure that it remains centered. We also want to center the elevator. The way we center the elevator is with a piece of masking tape, just like so. Now the elevator will remain centered while we're building the push rod. We have our Z-bends on each end, our carbon rod, and our heat shrink tubing. And now we're going to put a piece of cardboard behind that to shield it from the heat, and we're going to shrink the tubing and add our drop of thin CA. So this is extremely simple. I'm just using a piece of the packing box that the kit came in, and I've bent it and I'm using it as a heat shield behind the heat shrink, and I'm going to use my heat gun now. Okay, so I shrunk the tubing on each end. Now I'm just going to add a drop of thin CA and that will work its way back up under the heat shrink. Another drop of thin CA, and I can take off the masking tape, and the elevator system is done. We'll start off just by noting which side of the airplane we're working on. Let me zoom out a little bit here. One side of our airplane on the bottom has the truss. Okay, we want to work on the other side. We want to work on the side that doesn't have the truss. Okay, so on the side that doesn't have the truss, we're going to install our rudder horn. So if you squeeze the rudder, you can find the slot right there. So just like on all of the other horns that we've done, we're going to put glue in the slot. Let me show you what the rudder horn looks like. It's long, like the aileron horns, because it needs to stiffen the long rudder. So we're going to put welder's glue into the slot. Okay. Put a little glue on the horn, and it just slides into the slot. Okay. And just like on the aileron, it just center it up so that it comes through on the other side, and you can see the edge of the horn flush with the other side. Okay, so there's the rudder horn. Okay, so our final servo install is the rudder servo. So we assembled the rudder servo arm onto the rudder servo like we did the elevator. And here's the rudder servo location. It's pre-cut. What we're going to do is we're going to test fit the rudder servo into the slot. Okay, and it looks like we're going to need a little bit more room for this servo arm to swing forward. So that's easy to do. Take our hobby knife and we'll just open that up a little bit for that arm. Just a little tiny bit there. Make sure it's enough on both sides. Okay. Okay. Test fit the rudder servo again. Make sure you can see this on the camera. And we got a little bit of interference from the servo wire, so we can make just a little cut with our hobby knife to provide some clearance for the servo wire. Get a little bit of foam out of there. Not a whole lot is needed for that. There we go. And now the servo fits, and it's got full range of motion. Okay, so now we can glue it in, and all we need to do is just use our welder's glue and put a little bit of welder's glue right here where the servo is going to slide in, right around the bottom. Okay, and we'll just push the rudder servo into place. Okay, and there's the rudder servo installed. I'll zoom in so you can see precisely where it goes. Okay, now we'll zoom out. I'll show you that it's just flush with the fuselage. And it's, you can see how it looks on the other side. And if you notice, what we did there is we brought all three servo wires from all three servos out on the same side of the airplane, so it'll be easy to mount our receiver on this side of the airplane where all the servo wires are running. Okay. Now we'll let this cure for a few minutes, and then we'll make the rudder push rod the same way we've made all the other push rods on the aircraft. While we're making the rudder push rod, we of course want the rudder to stay straight. So we use the same trick that we used on the elevator. Just put a little masking tape. And this is the really good masking tape. This is the painter's masking tape, which when you peel it off doesn't take any paint with it. If you use the cheap masking tape, the yellow masking tape, be really careful and test it on some area on the bottom of the airplane to make sure that your masking tape doesn't take any paint off the airplane. This is the frog tape, the nice green masking tape, and we've used it enough, and we know that if we don't push down too terribly hard on it, it won't take any paint off the airplane. Okay, so now we're in the home stretch. I'm going to pan and show you the completed rudder push rod. Again, the hookup is the same. We use on all the servos we've tested, we use the outermost hole on the surface horn, in this case the rudder horn, and we'll pan along the push rod, and we use the wooden servo arm that we installed earlier, and the servo is installed. All of the servo wires are on the same side of the aircraft. It makes it easy to hook up the receiver. We've gone ahead and plugged them into the receiver. In this case, we're using a very lightweight receiver, and we want to use as light a receiver as possible. And we've also gone ahead and completed our motor install, and so we have our speed control on the same side of the airplane as the receiver. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut a pass-through in the fuselage, because we don't want everything to be on the same side of the aircraft. We would like to try to balance the weight from the left side to the right side of the fuselage. So since our receiver and our speed controller are on this side, we're going to put our batteries on the other side, battery on the other side. So we're going to take our hobby knife and just cut a pass-through through the fuselage, and we're going to push our battery plug through the slot in the fuselage. Okay. And now we can use a little welder's glue to attach the receiver and the ESC to the side of the aircraft. Okay, so we're down to our last few steps here before we have a flyable airplane. The ESC and your micro receiver have both been attached to the side of the aircraft with a drop of welder's glue. And we have made a pass-through here just with our hobby knife so that our battery plug is on the other side of the aircraft, so that the battery is on the opposite side as the ESC and the receiver.